Hello, everyone. My name is Alexia Ziccardi. I'm a master's student in cognitive science at Carleton University. So for a little background, in aviation psychology, studies have found that, unlike what might be speculated about the population, older pilots' experience and expertise do not protect them from certain types of cognitive aging issues seen in older population. Older age has also been associated with higher risk of critical incidents while flying. And so one area of research in aviation psychology involves how pilots process information. One of the key means by which pilots understand critical information used to perceive elements in their environment and further project and plan for future action is through auditory processing of orally presented information, such as radio communication messages. One of the goals of my study is to investigate age-related effects on the processing of auditory information along the auditory pipeline. So the experiment consisted of 51 licensed pilots, aged 17 to 71 years old. They each flew a 60-minute flight in a full-scale Cessna 172 simulator. Tones were frequently presented throughout flight, and among other tasks, pilots were asked to click on a yoke when they heard them. Throughout their flight, they also wore a 14-channel wireless EEG headset to record the data pertaining to auditory tones that were played throughout the flight. Independent component analysis was used to clean through EEG data of noise components, such as eye or muscle movement, and identify neural responses to the tone. So after investigating the event-related potential data, one of my findings was that in the primary auditory cortex, both the older participants and younger ones showed no significant differences in their neural activation at the N100 component, but older pilots did show significantly greater neural responses after the P200 component compared to the younger group. So the N100 component is typically related to noise detection, and therefore both groups seem to identify noise in the same way. However, at the P200 component and later, that's when it's typically related to cognitive processing or filtering of auditory information. So there seems to be a difference in the way older versus younger pilots process auditory information. So just to wrap things up quickly, my research has been investigating how pilots, older and younger, process auditory information along the auditory pipeline and use this information to prepare and execute actions. The research I presented today, it was just one small aspect of my work, looking specifically at the neural aspect of auditory information processing in pilot cognition. Findings showed that older participants seem to allocate more neural resources to later stages of auditory processing when presented with oral information. My research is an important area of investigation as it can contribute to the efforts made in understanding the role of aging in flight performance and in creating tools such as modulating earpieces or visual technologies that counteract the effects of aging and keep pilots flying as safely and as long as possible. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. I'm happy to discuss this part or other parts of my research with you in a question period or through email. I've added my email to the slide. So have a great rest of the day, and thank you for listening.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melanie Trabian, and I'm a master's student in human-computer interaction at Carleton University. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the CLUE program and its coordinators for giving me the opportunity to discuss my research today. I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Chris Herdman and Dr. Kathleen Van Bentham, for this research would not be possible without their support. In my research, I consider the efficacy of auditory alert systems in semi-autonomous vehicles from the perspective of neurological processing of multimodal information. Another area that I'm very interested in is the level to which drivers actually have to engage with and monitor their environments to ensure safety if an emergency situation is to arise. The goal of my research is to understand the role of age and how we might see differences in auditory processing across individuals while they're engaged in a visuospatial task. Although semi-autonomous vehicles are growing in popularity and in efficiency, there is still a lot that is yet to be discovered regarding the level of driver engagement that is necessary to ensure a safe interaction. There are currently different levels of automation, which are all pictured on this slide. But to narrow it down just a little bit, this research considers conditional and highly automated vehicles, where the requirement is that drivers must be engaged enough to perceive various forms of alerts as well as act on them, such as by taking control of the vehicle, which is also known as a handover. As for the methodology, I obtained EEG and behavioral data from 10 participants, 5 older, between the ages of 50 and 80 years, and 5 younger, between the ages of 18 and 32. Participants completed 4 rounds of a match-to-sample visual spatial task with 2 alternating levels of workload, low and high. The one that's shown on this slide is the low version. While completing the match to sample task, paired tones using an oddball protocol were delivered to the participants through over-ear headphones, which is also pictured in this slide. Now, for the sake of time, I won't be going very in-depth with the results, but very generally, in younger adults, deviant tones resulted in greater P200 components, which highlights the importance of auditory alert systems implementing novel alert sounds for emergencies, such as handover situations. Results also showed that neural responses to salient auditory tones were attenuated in older adults in difficult conditions of a visuospatial task. Similar results were seen whether the tone was presented first or second, and it was consistent across the primary auditory cortex, the somatosensory association cortex, as well as the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And now, just to quickly wrap it all up, based on these findings, it's clear that the effects of age and visuospatial workload on auditory processing are critical to consider, especially given that features and policies related to semi-autonomous vehicles are still being developed. It's also worthy to note that the findings of this work are not only applicable to semi-autonomous vehicles and alerting systems there. It also overlaps with other fields, such as aviation, that also include alerting and automation. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you all for listening. If you'd like to reach out or have any questions, my contact information is as follows. Thank you again.
So this research reports on the acceptance and responses to a virtual reality cognitive health screening tool for younger and older pilots. So in a 2018 study conducted by Dr. Van Bentham and Dr. Herdman from the East Lab here at Carleton, a virtual reality cognitive health screening tool called CanFly was developed for the cognitive assessment of both older and younger pilots in general aviation. This tool included a virtual flight environment, which had various tests embedded into it that assessed domain-dependent cognitive functions, such as situation awareness, prospective memory, and task load. So while this tool addresses the need for an ecologically valid assessment for the cognitive health of pilots, it's important to ensure that older pilots do not continue to experience systemic bias in the form of age-related negative effects from VR testing. So some of these negative effects include simulator sickness, discomfort, or a general lack of acceptance of 3D flight simulator devices amongst the older pilots. Hence, the present study investigates whether there is an age effect in the acceptance of a 3D virtual reality flight simulator versus a full-scale simulator. And it also seeks to identify any potential disadvantages VR simulators may have towards older pilots. So to investigate this, a sample of 51 pilots between the ages of 17 and 71 were put through 2 sessions of simulator flight. The first session was in a standard full-scale simulator, and the second was in the VR flight simulator, which included the cognitive assessment. The results so far have shown that the pilots preferred using the VR simulators as much as the older pilots rather preferred using the VR simulators as much as the younger pilots did. And with respect to their experience flying in the virtual reality environment, the major things that have emerged for both the older and younger pilots in their description of their experience was enjoyment, ease, fidelity, and immersiveness. Negative comments were relatively rare and tended to reflect discomfort with their head-mounted devices. So in conclusion, the results so far have shown that the head-mounted virtual reality simulation was well accepted by both younger and older pilots compared to the 2-dimensional flight simulator.